next legislative session. So we're going to be talking broadly about affordable housing and policy solutions. And this is, of course, ahead of our exciting policy forums tomorrow up in Northern Nevada at the Nugget, and next week on Tuesday on the 30th here in Las Vegas at the Culinary Academy. So if you haven't registered and you are a member, you're welcome to register for those, and we hope to see some of you there. We'll have a more robust discussion and talk about some potential policy solutions for the next legislative session. Also, our conference, our registration is open. Our conference is October 16th and 17th. We're in Northern Nevada this year, also at the Nugget. Registration is open for that. Amanda's going to be putting that in the chat, so you guys be sure and get yourself and your colleagues registered for our conference. We're going to have a really killer curriculum this year. We're still working out the details, and we'll have an agenda for you in the coming weeks, but please go ahead and get registered, and we can't wait for that. That's always a really great event. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off. Our moderator today is JD Klippenstein. He's also a board member and director of development for the Reno Housing Authority. And I'm going to let him take it away, and so we can go ahead and jump in.
Thanks, Shawana. Hey all, I'm JD. I'm happy to be here with you, and I'm really excited to get to moderate the panel that we have. We have a lot of folks on and a lot of fantastic knowledge and passion experience in this area. So I'm gonna try to keep my comments as brief as possible and give the speakers some time to share and you all time to ask questions. Wanted to set the stage though. I mean, we're going to be talking about what does the upcoming legislative session look like? What are the opportunities that we have for affordable housing policy? And also, what are the challenges that we continue to see in our communities that we want to find solutions or partial solutions for? But it's important to recognize the progress we've made already. The Housing Coalition has made a significant difference in the state already. And in particular, we had some major wins last session and also in the interim that have really advanced affordable housing around the state. And in particular, wanted to highlight AB 62, which modernized the property tax exemption for affordable housing. It opened up a lot more doors for affordable housing to get that property tax exemption that's really critical for them to operate affordably and keep so that the properties can be maintained and they can continue to offer affordable rent to folks. And we also passed AB 310, or we were a driver of that for sure. Huge shout out to everyone who was involved in it. It established the Nevada Supportive Housing Development Fund and what seeded it with a one-time investment of $32 million. And that should be rolling out very shortly. The Housing Division is administering that grant. And the goal is to really solve for permanent supportive housing in our state and start to get more projects online that can provide wraparound supportive services to help some of our most vulnerable community members stay housed and many times exit that cycle of homelessness. So it's a historic investment. I'm really excited to see that roll out and continue to make a difference in our community. And then we talk about it all the time, but Homeownership Nevada was a absolutely historic investment in affordable housing, $500 million going towards preservation, new development, homeownership. There are thousands of units online or in the process of being preserved and coming online that are happening because of that investment. So we have some big shoes to fill in this upcoming session, right? We want that momentum to carry forward, and we have many challenges we still need to address. So without further ado, that's why we have Ben Iness from the Nevada Housing Justice Alliance, Tina Frias, who is with the Southern Nevada Builders Association, and we have Maurice Page, who some of you may know as the executive director of the Nevada Housing Coalition. Each of them are going to talk about a different topic, a focus we have for policy, and then we'll be able to open up for questions a little bit later down the road. So first, I'm going to turn it over to Ben. We're going to spend some time thinking about the topic of access and services in terms of housing. And in particular, Ben, could you first talk a little bit like what are the challenges that we're looking to solve for? And then we'll circle back and you can talk about some of those solutions that we're looking at for this session.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, JD. Hello, everybody. It's so great to be here. My name is Ben Iness. I'm the coalition coordinator for the Nevada Housing Justice Alliance. I like to say we're the other housing coalition alongside the NHC. we're a statewide coalition. We work with community organizers and policy advocates. We work directly with tenants and really focused on addressing those root causes of housing insecurity, really trying to, push back and undo the status quo. Other small point, just a few short years ago in grad school, I would hop on Lunch and Learns to try and learn and expand my knowledge and tool belt around housing. So it's a really cool opportunity to be here right now. And to your question, JD, you kind of said, I think, just where we are right now and the issue. I think, imagine all folks on the call know, the depths and severity of our state's housing crisis, of which, started well before COVID and it was only exacerbated by it. And kind of speaking back to, our root cause philosophy for my role in my work, really trying not to just reduce it and simplify it to kind of a commodity, just simple supply and demand kind of economics and market forces. Really focused on keeping folks housed, preventing displacement. Our evictions are surpassing pre-pandemic levels. We have this pipeline, from our affordability crisis to our rapid summer eviction process to really putting folks out on the streets, record numbers. And we're having, unsheltered deaths increasing. All sides of our state are experiencing, extreme climate events that, only seem to be worsening. So it's very dire situation at times. Let me pause there and let you probe if there's something I missed.
No, I mean, I imagine when we're talking about access and services, we're thinking about who are the folks that are really on the edge or the margins in terms of housing. Some folks have the most difficulty accessing affordable housing and maintaining that housing. And there's a lot of different reasons, like you just named, and a lot of different challenges those folks may run into. So I think in particular, if you wanted to kind of pivot to knowing the challenges that are faced by the community, what are some of the solutions that are in front of us, some of the things that we want to make sure are on folks' radars, those policies?
Absolutely. And again, just recognizing my own bias in my work, but really hoping that all folks here, and folks off the call as well, if we're taking this crisis seriously, then that means we're using all tools available at our disposal. And so, yes, that's, increasing supply and managing affordability there. But going back to that idea of keeping folks housed now, and what that means and looks like. So again, eviction prevention, that idea of, what's the best way to stabilize a home, and just like, let's prevent it from ever being destabilized. And so, I've been alluding to eviction reform. Nevada's summer eviction process is kind of unlike anywhere else in the country, which just means it's a very rapid and kind of imbalanced process between tenant and landlord, which is difficult to navigate. With our state's growth, so many folks from out of state, are unfamiliar with that process, don't know that it's real. If folks do understand it, they're probably largely feeling hopeless and may even self-evict before trying to, acquire services from, say, legal aid. Or something like that. And then to say nothing for our rental assistance kind of process, which is so bogged down. I don't think tenants can wait and hope for those countless weeks to receive it. And same on the landlord side. Well, I don't think landlord side as well, who don't have buy-in to, again, kind of sit and wait when they're trying to manage their own upkeep and properties. So again, preventing evictions wherever possible. So expanding rental assistance, reform the summer eviction process, and other baseline fundamental tenant protections. Again, I think if we're only going to build our way out of this, and that might take, a decade or more, what are all the, really, I think, powerful and creative and empowering ways that we can support tenants today. So whether clarity on fees, I can't tell you some of the situations that I hear about and encounter when canvassing with other organizations within the coalition, that there are no restrictions or regulations around how source of income is such a large barrier. So again, it's not only having houses and homes available, and we know how severe the shortage is in our state, but really improving access and removing those barriers to folks, to get folks in that housing, and then to stay housed. And it's often a hot topic, but rent stabilization, we can set very creative and flexible limits to how much rent can increase, and that can look differently between Reno as it does Las Vegas, and do it in ways that meets the needs of those communities. but no one should have, you know, their rent go up 20% in 1 year or a few short years when we certainly know that their income is not, you know, keeping up with that. Yeah, so tenant protections, rent stabilization, eviction reform, to recap. Let me know if I missed anything.
Yeah, no, thanks, Ben. I was rapidly taking notes.
Yeah.
But so, and again, obviously it's a big topic, right? So it's hard to, there's a lot of different things that, different tools that, and your work you're looking for, and you want to make sure that folks are aware of when it comes to some of the policy discussions that may be happening at the state level. But to summarize, it was, you know, looking at the summary eviction reform, increasing or continuing some of the emergency rental assistance that's available, looking at source of income discrimination, how do we address source of income discrimination, as well as increasing transparency on fees that some renters are facing. And also, what do like rent stabilization policies look like? So those are like five things.
Yeah.
I just wanted to set the stage. Well, I definitely want there to be some Q&A from the audience.
Okay.
But I wanted to make sure, Ben, before I move over to Tina, I wanted to make sure that you felt like you got everything on the table.
Yeah, that's very thoughtful. I appreciate that, JD. May I make one last comment?
Yeah, please go for it.
Again, just going back to the idea of using, you know, all the tools on the table or at our disposal. Many of these bills were introduced last session and sessions beyond. You know, and it's difficult when trying to build, you know, not only the community will, but also the political will. And so for these bills to be, you know, unfortunately vetoed by Governor Lombardo, or to even stall and die earlier, you know, in committee. And so really trying to, you know, grateful for the opportunity to speak on these and how necessary they are to, you know, for all of us to advance our shared vision and like giving folks housing and keeping them housed. Yeah, thank you, JD.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And I'm gonna transition over because I think one topic, housing, obviously we have a huge need in our community, and but there isn't really like a one size fits all kind of housing. And I think what I love about the access and services kind of focus area is it is really focused on our neighbors who are running into lots of barriers of securing stable housing from the get-go. But at the same time, there are a lot of folks who may have stable housing. They may be renters. They may have folks that might not be dealing with homelessness or some of the other challenges that I think Ben is alluding to, but they are stuck where they're at. And unless they're able to kind of keep building some equity on their own, maybe ensure their family has equity and financial stability moving forward through homeownership, then they're stuck there as renters and they're not able to get into affordable homeownership. So recognizing that it's a big topic, I wanted to turn it over to Tina and talk a little bit about the challenges that folks are facing in terms of affordable homeownership, and then what are some of the policy ideas or funding ideas that folks should be aware of in that conversation.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, JD, and thank you to the Nevada Housing Coalition for this opportunity to be a part of this panel on this very important topic. So I'm Tina Frias, and I am the CEO of the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association. Many of you are very familiar with our association, been around a very long time. We have a strong board of both large builder companies as well as our trades and our subcontractors. Who are very actively engaged in the community. Many of our board members are homegrown and very concerned about ensuring that Nevadans can get into these homes. I think that we are certainly in a unique time because, you know, we're at a time where interest rates are maybe higher than what we've seen in the most recent years. And you have a number of folks that are in existing homes and don't, want to lose that interest rate. So that kind of impacts the availability of product when it comes to existing homes. And then you have various factors that, are leading to the price of homes going up. What I can tell you is that certainly the membership that I represent, there's no other group of folks that are more interested in a healthy housing market because we certainly want to be able to play a role and get Nevadans in those homes. I can also share with you that over 25% of current house closings are going towards the home builders at this time. And some of the things that are going on there are in regards to the fact that home builders are able to work with lending companies and buy down interest rates. So that is an opportunity that is filling a void in terms of enabling some folks that wouldn't have been able to afford that home to get in to a home that wouldn't have been able to do that otherwise. So going to things that are, important in terms of creating solutions to housing attainability, I'm going to bring up, the obvious one, which is land. And that's certainly something that's very important to us to be able to have the opportunity to have the developable land. We're projected to run out of developable land for new home development within the next 8 years. So Southern Nevada Home Builders Association has certainly been supportive of the legislation that Catherine Cortez Mastos introduced a few weeks ago that would give us the opportunity to expand that disposable boundary in Nevada. But some of the other things, as we talk more specifically at the state level, we talk about regulations and things like that that drive up the cost of the home. But one opportunity that we have is there is a model called HERS indexing. And so what it does when it comes to the international energy code requirements for builders, it enables them to be able to identify ways to make the home efficient in a more creative way. And what that means is we would be looking at the whole energy efficiency of the home, as opposed to very specific prescriptive requirements for energy efficiency. So it would allow the builders to maybe, for example, invest more in buying bulk in windows that are more energy efficient, but maybe they cut costs in another area. But overall, the energy efficiency of the home is exceeding code requirements. And so that is an opportunity that certainly would be beneficial to us to be able to, bring down some of that cost. And I know that's something that's being looked at nationally. One of the other things that we always speak about is land, labor, and lumber. And so certainly labor becomes an issue, and I don't feel that I can speak on behalf of the Northern HBA, but I do know it, particularly in the North, there's a lot of concerns with being able to get labor, but we have those issues as well. And so anything that we can do to do things like supporting the Southern Nevada Trades High School, it's not only giving back to our community because it's investing in children that can go into these very high paid jobs, but it also educates them on a career path. Again, changes the trajectory of their families because of this opportunity to make, good money, maybe for some folks who don't want to go to college or it's just not the right fit. But it gets us the labor that we need to build these homes, and any other types of programs that can be put in place in terms of educating folks, even throughout the CCSD school district, charter schools and everything else, for those who are interested, that's something that would be very beneficial for us. On a broader scale, at the end of the day, I think it's very important to ensure that there are incentives in place to build homes for the missing middle. Oftentimes, you see there's programs where you're at 60% of AMI and below, and there's, programs to support building in that space, and that's needed, and that's great. But with, needing to make over $96,000 a year in Southern Nevada to own a home, and needing to make over $70,000 a year to rent, and the average income in Southern Nevada, as we all know, being below $60,000, there's a gap there in terms of our middle class people who are out there working. And like I said before, as home builders, we want to get Nevadans in those homes. We care about these communities. And I think when we look at programs that can provide incentives for builders and not penalties, because when you talk about penalties, at the end of the day, that's going to result in the counterproductivity of what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring down the cost on what it costs to build that actual home. And so, you know, whether that be some type of incentives on the lands or taxes, or things of that nature, anything that we can do to reach that group, the better. And I would also challenge folks that when we're talking about the missing middle, you know, we're usually looking at somewhere between 60,000 or 60% of AMI up to 120. The way things are in the current state of Nevada, you know, I would say look at programs that expand beyond the 120 and even go up to 150% of AMI. So I think that is primarily, you know, in terms of policy things that, you know, we would recommend.
Yeah, thank you, Tina. And I always like the catchphrase, the land, labor, lumber, like these distinct categories. What does it look like to incentivize, you know, the increased production around that while doing that in creative ways, you know, with some of the energy efficiency and also looking at land availability. It's a broad topic there. I'm hoping some folks have some questions that they can jump into a little bit later. For the sake of time, I'm going to move forward over to Maurice, who is going to talk a little bit, you know, it's a small topic. It's just development and preservation. It's not a big thing to tackle. I'm being a bit sarcastic, Maurice, but the truth is we've seen a lot of growth in this area. We've seen historic investments in it. But there are still a lot of challenges when it comes to new development of affordable housing. This would be specifically folks at 60, sometimes 80% AMI or lower. And oftentimes we're looking at multifamily rental housing here. And then in addition to preserving those properties that are providing that affordable housing. So Maurice, could you set the stage a bit on what the challenges, what challenges remain? And then also, what are some of the solutions that folks on this call should be thinking about and looking at for the session?
Yes, absolutely. First and foremost, thank you to my team for putting this Lunch and Learn together, putting this dynamic panel together. You definitely have a great balance of the areas where the housing is needed throughout the state of Nevada. Ben and Tina, they made some incredible points. And, you know, as I was sitting here jotting and listening, you know, you hear the words, we're in a unique housing situation, we're in, you know, dire straits. At times I've been quoted as saying we're just in a housing crisis state. And I believe all of that really applies to where we're at as a state and where we need to go moving forward. As JD has alluded to, the Housing Coalition has been at the forefront in crafting policy and creating bills to be able to bring more housing here to Nevada, so that, you know, everyone will be able to not only be able to get into housing but sustain housing. But we still have a long way to go. I'm not going to labor on the statistics of what the shortages is and things of that nature, but when we talk about challenges going forward, we know that, you know, HM&I is coming to a close pretty shortly. And so we need to be able to create more funding opportunities so that this way we can keep the development going and also preserve the affordable housing stock that we have currently. But as I was thinking about this question and trying to put things together, and I reflected on the roundtables that the coalition has had over the last few months, and where we met with different groups and was able to get feedback on what they're seeing. You know, here's what the comments, or here's what the challenges, you know, are still people are seeing, and people are saying, hey, we need to figure out solutions for. And Tina touched on the very first one, land availability and cost. It is huge. If we can change that, if we can have some segue and some headway to that, that would be a huge maneuver for the state of Nevada. Funding and financing is number two. We definitely we're limited with our funding. We're going to be having challenges going forward. Understanding that the governor is creating a baseline budget moving forward, we have to be very creative in how we want to create possible funding solutions for more development and preservation. talk about preservation, creating a preservation for affordable housing. We need a preservation trust fund. We have a ton of properties that are coming up. And so in order for those not to turn into market rate, we need to be able to balance that out. And so we need to create a funding opportunity or a mechanism so that this way we can keep those homes for our individuals. Again, Tina talked about that 60 to 120, possibly even going up to 150. We have to look at, not only that area, that workforce, but we also have to pay attention to that low income area. NIMBYism. NIMBYism is alive and well. And I was just in a meeting where, I was presented or told about a meeting that was held in Boulder City recently, and how, the folks of the community, even though there was a senior housing project that is going to be built, the city was very adamant that they did not want that in their communities. So I believe, we have to create campaigns, mythbusters around NIMBYism and show people that affordable housing is not a bad thing. It is a great thing for our communities. It ups people's property values. And so we have to demonstrate and educate those who are unaware of what this type of entity can bring. Furthermore, income equality, wage stagnation. Ben talked about, the evictions and the lack of people not being able to pay rents because of the amount that they're going up. Part of the reason is for the last 13, 14 years, we have seen housing costs go up 230%, whereas wages have only increased by 36%. And so there needs to be a balance. We need to be able to increase salaries, so that people can afford and sustain their housing that they're presently in. And then ultimately, we have to look at our homeless sector. Numbers are rising since the pandemic. We're at an all-time high, I believe, just in Clark County alone. We're at close to 75 to almost 8,000 people that were part of our point in time count. And so with those numbers rising and with the lack of opportunity, the lack of housing, affordable housing options, we have to provide more opportunities for them. And with that, and how we go about that will be through more development, gaining more development dollars, and furthermore, creating or maintaining our preservation of our affordable housing stock. So those are, when you look at it, from that point, those are the 7 issues primarily that we're faced with and what we are dealing with. In regards to policy solutions and where we can move forward, I think, it's not even what I think. It's about public and private relationships. We have to merge those two. We have to have more dialogue. We have to have our various industries be a part of the solution. We have to create more tax incentives. We have to create more credits. We have to be able to provide property tax abatements for affordable housing. And I know that is a controversial statement, but I think that is a conversation that needs to be had. Again, we have to be able to create more funding for our housing trust funds. That's probably at the forefront of where we can get things started. Luckily, we've already, moved in, and we have 8310 that's going to create supportive housing programs. That bill alone will help moving forward with helping people sustain housing and providing them the resources that's needed to be able to move forward and be able to become more of a spender in our economy. And then lastly, I would say definitely we need to look at workforce housing and workforce development. Tina mentioned about that missing middle. Well, that missing middle is our workforce at the end of the day. And so we need to be able to provide opportunities for them to be able to sustain their housing and provide more opportunities for them. And we have to be very, the word, and JD, you've brought this up in multiple conversations previously, but the word innovative, I believe, is overused. Realistically, we have to come up with some sound solutions, and we have to look at emerging best practices that are happening in other states, and we have to be able to lean on them to be able to see what we can bring here to Nevada. And so, those are the things that we need to definitely look at. And also, I said workforce housing, but workforce development. So again, increasing wages, training our folks, getting more folks that are involved in laborized work. So our plumbers, our welders, our painters, things of that nature. If we can train that sector and build up that next generation, that will help offset some of the issues that we're going through right now.
Thanks, Maurice. So I hope that it's honestly a teaser. We're throwing a lot of really big, deep, complicated topics out there. And I hope a lot of you are like, but what about this? But what about that? Because you should come to our policy forums. We have 5 hours tomorrow, Northern Nevada Policy Forum, to dig into some of these in much more depth. And then on next Tuesday and on the 30th, we're having the very similar forum down in Southern Nevada. So I hope if you're on this call, you're aware of those forums and that you'll be there. If you haven't registered, please do so. It's going to be the perfect time to dig into these more. This is really to kind of set the stage and say that there's really no shortage of solutions we need to address our housing crisis in our state. There isn't one, it's not a one size fits all. There's not a silver bullet, unfortunately. So there's a lot of conversations that we need to have. And our hope from those forums is to kind of develop some more concrete ideas, some potential policy solutions that the Housing Coalition knows what to focus on in the 2025 session. So I really appreciate Maurice, Ben, and Tina, you taking the time to set the stage for those conversations moving forward. But I also know that when it comes to effective advocacy work, it's important to understand what's happening inside the building. So we have, I'm going to refer to them as Nic Squared. We have Nic Ciccone and Nic Vander Poel, who are here to offer some insight, primarily from kind of a government affairs perspective of, you know, what does the legislative process look like? What should we be thinking of in terms of timeline and, you know, the steps that have to happen to get something from an idea to a BDR to included in the budget. And then we'll also circle back and see if they have some advice on what does effective advocacy look like in this area. So I'm going to turn over to Nic Ciccone first, let him fully introduce himself. And then if you wanted to provide just kind of an overview of what you're thinking this session is going to look like and kind of what the important timelines you're paying attention to right now are.
Thanks, JD. Nic Ciccone, Government Affairs Manager for the City of Reno. I think it's super interesting that you asked me this question because I'm actually going up before council to present our bill draft request ideas to them later today. I think, you know, if you asked me a week ago, I probably would have said the 2025 legislative session is going to look a little bit different than the unprecedented weeks that we've had this this election cycle. I think it'll be super interesting to keep our ears to the ground and kind of understand, you know, what will help us work with the grain rather than against it. I think that that's the biggest thing for me. Clearly, so far, the bipartisan push seems to be for land availability, and BLM cutting red tape seems like a very common crossover between the two parties. I think regardless of how next legislative session plays out, and I'll answer your question a little bit more after I let Nic go, but I think, you know, the most important thing to me is just understanding the political capacity that we have as individual members and then as this housing coalition. And for me, the big thing in my push to our city council will be, you know, it's a lot better to be going into that building with a bunch of partners than it is to be going in alone. But I will toss it over to Nic Vander Poel.
Thanks, Nic. Nic Vander Poel with Flynn Giudici Government Affairs. We represent the Nevada Housing Coalition at the legislature. Some basic markers that I'm looking at is we're less than 200 days from the beginning of the 2025 legislative session, which begins on February 3rd, 2025. And so I think the biggest thing that we're watching right now is that any way you want to look at the next legislative session, 25% of the legislators will be freshmen. And so this will be their first time basically serving as a legislator. And that creates a learning curve because there's historical knowledge, there's ideas that they may put forward that we said we tried that once, it did not work. However, there is opportunity to potentially craft legislation that they are looking at and maybe make it a more palatable to get it across the finish line and signed by the governor. One of the things I think that is relevant to this conversation and to the participants today is everybody to understand it's no secret that the governor's office is building a baseline budget. So what that means is we are obviously working with the request that we would like to see in terms of additional revenue is not necessarily on the table. However, that may change after May 1st when the Economic Forum meets, which is a group of economists that look at the budget and look at the projections. And if they solidify the projections and there is additional revenue on the table, that's when we see obviously the opportunities for what I would call earmarks, et cetera, for specific projects across the state. And it's everything from nonprofits to development. But I definitely been watching the Economic Forum. I recognize why the governor wants to be conservative in his budget. But I do say this, I do see the state of Nevada is doing well. And hopefully it continues on that path. And then that would eventually fund projects as it relates to affordable housing. I'll leave it at that and happy to open it up, JD.
Yeah, I kind of want to, I'll set the stage a bit because I wanted to follow up and think through how can folks be effective in some of our advocacy work? Because the truth is, right, that of course we know the budget we have is the budget we have, and in that budgets really are, it's like a list of priorities, right? It's not a thing set in stone. It says here are the things we care the most about, here are the things we care less about, and those usually have a dollar amount attached to them. So I think the goal of the Housing Coalition is to make sure that the prioritization of affordable housing continues to increase. And that's not an easy thing to do. It's something that we have to keep raising the profile of. And if, NICs, or plural, as when you look at how the legislature works and how, kind of that the sausage is made in terms of that, what are some things that would help us be effective in continuing to elevate the needs of affordable housing so that it continues to rise up the ranks in terms of budget priorities and program priorities? I'll let either of you. You can.
I'll go first, and then I'll let Nic chime in. I would say, obviously the policy forums that are going to take place tomorrow and next week are essential. I think if there's some ideas that we can get behind that we can take to the legislature as well as the executive branch, and that opportunity that, again, we're not going to solve the Nevada housing crisis in 2025. However, if we can identify some potential opportunities that we can move the needle, and whether it helps at the local level and some of their activities, but I also look at, I'll give credit. I know the Nevada federal delegation is working diligently on some of these lands bills to get them processed so we can open up some land for potential development across Nevada. So I think this is a one size fits all. You have the Nevada federal delegation, you got the state of Nevada, and then you got local governments. If we're working together, that's when you're going to come up with solutions.
Thanks, Nic. Over to you, Nic.
Well, I don't have a saying such as land, labor, and lumber, but one that I really like is turf power in politics, which kind of comes down to that land use planning designation and what Nic had alluded to earlier. But I think making sure that with these policy forums, we're getting all of those different ideas and feedback. I think, I've said it before, and I won't say it in a super maybe it's not the right way to say it, but I think it's important to hash out what we can before we even step foot in that building. I think that will be the most important part, especially because we don't know what the legislative makeup is going to look like for that body. And so it could go either way next legislative session. And so it'll be important to, understand what the governor is looking for, as well as what the legislature and those relevant committees are looking for, especially the money committees as we approach that May 1st deadline.
Thanks.
And I'll add on there real quick, just so for everybody participating on Economic Forum, they'll be meeting around December 3rd. for their 2024 to set their initial projections. So if you want to watch how much revenue is going to be coming, potential revenues in the state of Nevada, first week of December, that's one to look at. And then again, it's not solidified until May 1st, 2025. But there's the initial projections and then you have the final projections. So just for the audience to understand.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I know in a previous role, I was really involved in grassroots advocacy, getting community members into the building and having those conversations. And I guess my takeaway, something I'd add on to this before pivoting to questions, is these decisions aren't made if we sit back and hope that someone else makes the right decision, right? So part of us having this conversation today and those being further developed in the policy forums, and then is to find the things that we want to get behind, the solutions we want to bring to the table, and for that to be a collaborative, collective thing, because it's not going to happen unless someone has those ideas, someone is pushing those ideas, and we're having those conversations with decision makers. So the hope is we have the right ideas, and that we have ideas that have a lot of buy-in, that are meaningful, and will address the challenges that have been laid out today. So that takes a lot of folks. People on the call, some of you might have a ton of experience in policy work, advocacy work. Some of you may not. You just know that something's not right. Something needs to get fixed. So I really want you all to see the coalition as a vehicle and a place where you can bring that energy and that passion, so that we can address the really deep issues of housing affordability in our state. And I appreciate you all being here to listen to our panelists. We have, I think, about 15 minutes left on the call. So I am going to open it up to Q&A in a little bit, but first I'm going to do kind of last call. If anyone wants to add some words of wisdom, any of our panelists, I wanted to open up to that. Nick, I'm hoping that hand raised means you have some words of wisdom, and then we'll go to see if anyone else.
I wouldn't go so far as to call it wisdom, but I was just going to point out that there are a lot of bill draft request deadlines coming up, including for cities, as well as some legislative deadlines. And the interim committees will be posting their bill draft requests soon, or at least we'll have a better idea of how many of those are actually going to be touching on housing. So I think as we approach and get closer to September 1st, it'll be important to keep an eye out on that bill draft request list.
Thanks, Nick. Anyone else have some wisdom or some final thoughts before we jump into questions?
Yeah, I would just like to chime in very briefly, and again, the importance of these policy forums. Again, talking about policy, but also creating long-range planning in regards to housing. A lot of times what we do is we look for the next shiny thing or a shiny new policy that could possibly do some great work, but we're not thinking long range. We need to figure out where we're going to be in 10 years, 15 years from now. And so the conversation amongst our coalition members is, you're part of the solution. You're part of this brain trust. And so I urge you that when you're coming into these policy meetings, to bring your ideas, to bring some thought into what you would like to see done, and think of some long range, because one of the goals moving forward is to be able to use and rely on our coalition members to be able to advocate for more housing throughout the state of Nevada. We want to be able to build up our coalition so that we can use you as a resource when needed. And so, again, in my conversations and through these roundtables that we have conducted, and through other conversations through our policy committee and things of that nature, the best thing that we can do is look at long range. If we know that 2025, there's a baseline, there may not be a surplus, there may be a surplus. Who knows where that's going to go? Maybe there's an opportunity for us to ask for additional monies. But if not, how can we start the conversations so that this way, when we move into the next session in 27 or 29, that we will already have maybe yeses, and it won't be such a fight to be able to move forward. I saw briefly, and we can jump into the Q&A after this, but it talked about how do we get more, I believe the question was targeted around how do we get more legislators involved? Well, the coalition is already doing that. The work is already being done right now. We are talking to legislators. This is what our roundtables was all about, bringing those individuals to the table and discussing and getting their viewpoints, because we want to know what is their understanding around housing, number one, and then number two, how we can build them up and educate them on what's going on within their district or their jurisdictions. So those conversations are being had. Again, we're going to continue to have those conversations with them. But what's most important for me and to the team at NHC and to our board of directors is that we want to see our coalition members be more involved and be able to get active. Thank you.
Thanks, Maurice. I'm gonna actually, I'm hoping Joanna or Amanda, someone's been paying more attention to the chat than I have, so that you've been seeing some of the questions that have come in. And Joanna, if you want to throw some of those out so our team can respond to it, that'd be great.
Great discussion in the chat actually about corporate landlords. And the question is, any considerations for policies preventing or limiting private equity investors from consuming the housing stock in Nevada? I think there's always a little bit of discussion on that, but maybe we could elaborate a little bit and talking about any statistics or data that we have on that information that you guys are leading. I think I saw Ben put a really great article in the chat as well, if anyone who's listening, any of our audience members wants to dive a little deeper.
If I could just jump in, I can probably start the conversation a little bit. I know Senator Rosen drafted a bill, the HOME Act, in regards to private equity investors and folks of that nature coming in and buying up in surplus of homes and then putting them back on the market at double the rates or higher or at higher rates. And so the coalition has supported that and is working with our office very closely to try to get that moved and approved. With that, the goal of that bill is to limit how much they can purchase. And then if they surpass that number of units that they're able to purchase, they will be taxed heavily and that money will go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So we are working on that. Nothing has been approved as of yet. Nick, maybe, or Nick to Second Powers, if y'all have any updates, y'all can chime in. But as it stands right now, that is something that we're still working on and trying to get that bill approved and moved forward.
Great. It looks like Meredith from our great partner from the Gwynn Center put some articles on rental housing statistics too, for those of you who are interested in more of the data side of things.
Nic Ciccone, so I appreciate you using the hand raise function. It's helpful. Did you have
trying to get in queue
to add to that?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say I can't speak to Senator Rosen's bill, but I will say we're going through our business license code update currently. And one thing that we don't have is a lot of data on who owns multiple rental units when it's single family homes. One of the options in there currently, if you're an apartment and you own obviously more than 3 units, then you actually have to self-report and say that you are a business owner, for lack of a better word. If you own 3 or more single family homes currently, it's actually inequitable in that you are not treated the same and you don't have to report or pay a business license to actually, and we're not collecting that data. So I don't know what the stakeholders will say on that. We're in the middle of a draft proposal for the business license code update. But currently that's not something that we, I would say, have a great grasp on as local governments.
Thanks, Tina. It looks like you had something you want to add as well.
So I'll tell you that we have a number of builders that actually have parameters on the number of homes that can be sold. And it's like very small percentages, just because they have a big interest in the integrity of the community, because that really impacts their brand when you buy their homes. And I've talked to some of them where they actually sign agreements like you have to stay in the home for so long and things that cover like how that ownership is. That's not the case for everybody. And I can tell you that one of the things, I've seen different statistics out there, but it's really hard to quantify exactly how many are investing in those types of homes, because you really have to be vigilant in regulating that, right? Like, how would you know? Sometimes like you'd have to get creative in identifying who's the investor and who's not. But I can say that there are a number of builders out there that are definitely have that of concern. And I know in looking at some of legislation that has been across the country that there is, there's certainly a concern in terms of investors, not just in Nevada, but across the United States and how that impacts the market.
Thanks, Tina. think I'm guessing maybe one or two more questions, and I'm sure we will keep track of the questions that were asked. So if we don't get to yours, we can follow up, or again come to the policy forums, and we can have that more robust conversation. But maybe one more before we go, Joanna.
Yeah, I don't see any new questions. Hold on, there's some. Oh, are any panelists working to advance infill development and or transit-oriented development? That's a great question, definitely policy related. Does anybody want to talk a little bit about some of the work that's happening around the state in transit-oriented development or infill or zoning?
Ciccone, I'm not. Oh, go ahead. I didn't want to put Reno on the spot, but I know that there's been some conversations there. But go ahead, Tina.
So we're certainly supportive of the opportunity for density, and you know, some of our products are more single family homes, but certainly when there's an opportunity for townhomes, that's something that's of interest to us. And then we certainly work with the Regional Transportation Commission on their resource committee to look at what infrastructure is being in place and how we can build in connectivity with that.
I don't want to expose
There were some
myself
interesting
as
conversations, so go for it.
very clearly not being a planner, but I will say, you know, it is definitely the philosophy of the city of Reno and our region to support infill development. We call it like the McCarran Loop is what we're trying to stay within. And generally, actually, if you look at the Regional Transportation Commission of Washoe County, their bus ridership increased the most in the entire country. And they got a substantial infusion of dollars for that. So I think for us and for our region, it'll be really important to start building up as opposed to out. And obviously, you know, a big hurdle there, and I've mentioned it to many people in this group, is infrastructure and sewer and roads, and what will that actually look like, so that we can make sure that both market rate housing is affordable as well as affordable housing proper. But I think, you know, generally it's my philosophy that you can't call housing affordable if you're spending, you know, $500 on gas every month.
Nice, Nick. Joanna, is there any other questions you want to highlight?
So I think we're at a great stopping place. We talked about other ways that legislators can be educated, especially the newcomers, definitely keeping an eye out for opportunities and events that the coalition is hosting, and other advocacy organizations like the Nevada Housing Justice Alliance also has events where they have interviews with candidates and opportunities to share or hear from candidates and also share concerns. So keep staying tuned into those, joining newsletters and email lists. We got some great links in there for data around the corporate investment, but that's definitely a topic that comes up a lot. And I would also stay tuned and consider the conference and consider some other coalition events that are going to be around infill and transit-oriented development, because that's another topic that's really leading conversations right now. So I think that you'll start to see that a lot more. Any final notes before we close?
I mean, as a moderator, I just want to thank the panelists. Really appreciate you all taking the time and the conversation that was had. I also, for the participants, the audience, thank you for the questions and all the information sharing. It's really, I love seeing when a chat's active, because otherwise it's just super awkward. So thank you for making it less awkward for me. And I'll turn it over to Maurice for the final words, but thanks again.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being part of this panel discussion. Looking forward to seeing many of you at our policy forums again tomorrow at the Nugget Sparks from 10 to 3, and then next week in Southern Nevada at the Culinary Academy again from 10 to 3. We're expected to have a great crowd, so I'm looking for some great conversation, great dialogue, some creative thinking. For us to be able to push the needle forward when it comes to housing here in the state of Nevada. To my team, thank you so much for pulling this all together. They've been working tirelessly over these last month or so, putting the policy forum together. And so I just want to credit them for all the hard work that they're putting in and that they're doing to get this all together. To the members of the coalition, to our stakeholders, again, thank you so much. I appreciate your support. We appreciate you being here and working with the coalition and working with all of us. So with that being said, have a great afternoon. Thank you all, and looking forward to seeing you in the community.